and General Robert E. Lee was going from Fredericksburg, Virginia, over to Culpeper. Now, how many of y'all have seen those yellow flags that says, don't tread on me? Yes, that came out of Culpeper. That was during the Revolutionary War when the Culpeper Minutemen put that flag up, and they developed that flag for the British not to tread on them. Well, they were going to the same town, but this was 1865. It was on a Friday. And so Lee was moving his men from Fredericksburg over to Culpeper. And then that was Friday morning. Then Sabbath, they'd stay over Friday night. Then Sabbath, they would head on over to the breadbasket of the South, which was the Shenandoah Valley. And then they would go north to a town called Gettysburg. What happened? Gettysburg, 1865, July 1, 2, and 3. The Battle of Gettysburg, that's right. And see, what happened was as Lee was going from Culpeper from Fredericksburg to Culpeper, Lincoln sent General Hooker, down to try to intersect him to cut him off. If Hooker had caught Lee, we would not have Gettysburg, the Gettysburg that we know today. That same day, it was, again, Friday, July 5, 1863. A group of folks left Battle Creek for Otsego, Michigan. And Otsego is a little town about 30 minutes north east of Battle Creek. Elder and Mrs. White were in one of the carriages, and then there were several other families that were in other carriages. And there was an evangelistic series that was going on. Different states had different series. And the Michigan evangelistic series was in Otsego. And R.J. Lawrence and M.E. Cornell were having their evangelistic meetings. And they began just a few days before May 28th. And it's very interesting. What did I say? Oh yes, it's 1863. Thank you. And so Mrs. White said this evangelistic series should go as long as people would come. Not 3 weeks, not 4 weeks, not 6 weeks, but as long as the folks would come, continue this evangelistic series. Well, they were going from Battle Creek to talk with this group, to encourage these two pastors in this evangelistic series for the state of Michigan. And different states were having their own evangelistic series during that time. It was Friday evening. They got there before sundown. And so at the White stayed at the Hilliard home, and just a few miles from town, and everybody came to have Friday evening sundown worship. Mr. Hilliard asked Mrs. White to have prayer, and so she walks over to her husband, and she puts her hand on his shoulder, and she starts praying. Well, Elder White was having some health issues, and she first started the prayer asking God to care for her husband. And then as she's praying, she goes off in vision. And she has what is known as the health vision, which we learned all kinds of stuff. And I'm not going to talk about those this morning, but what is it that came out of that vision? It's interesting. Do you know what date she says that vision was on? June 6. Well, when I read that, she said it's June 6. I'm thinking, well, she's not wrong. So I go back and I look at the calendar of June 5, 1863. It was a Friday, so it was June 5. And then I go back and I'm reread what's going on with Lee taking his troops from Fredericksburg over to Culpeper. History books say that's June 5. But in her writing, she says this vision was on June 6. What do you reckon?
After sundown.
So I called the White Estates. Well, the director of the White Estates was gone. The assistant director was there, and he said exactly what you said. I said, that's the only thing I can think of. He said, yes. It's because it was after sundown. And the pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, when sundown came, whatever day of the week, they followed the Genesis 1.
The evening in the morning.
The evening in the morning. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it wasn't midnight. It was sunset. I was trying to figure out how y'all observe Sabbath here, and the only one I could figure out how to observe Sabbath is sundown to sundown. Well, that's what Genesis said. You know, it said sundown to sundown. Yeah. So, boy, my throat's having a hard time this morning. So I'd like to look at several questions this morning. Why were we given the medical missionary work, the message, in this dream? Who's to be a medical missionary, and what is a medical missionary to do? That's what I'd like to look at this morning. So let's take a look. Why were we given the medical missionary work? Christ, the great medical missionary, is our example. So if he came here to be our example, and if he was a medical missionary, does that mean that we need to be a medical missionary? Absolutely. Christ, the great medical missionary, is our example. He healed the sick, so we need to help the sick. He preached the gospel. We need to preach the gospel. In his service, healing and teaching were linked closely together. Today, they are not to be separated. Now, as you heard last night, I'm a fireman. And when I come off the mountain down to I-40, Interstate 40, and let's say there's a wreck. We had a terrible wreck the other night. Fortunately, the guy's still alive. He and his wife had an argument. He gets mad at her, gets drinking, gets on his motorcycle, and he takes off down the interstate, weaving in and out of traffic. He wrecked, hit the guardrail, ripped his arm off. Fortunately, there's a nurse that was traveling behind him, and she was able to put a tourniquet. We were just 5 miles away. Actually, we just finished filling up 2 of our trucks from a tractor-trailer fire, so we easily were able to jump on the interstate, get there very fast. But when we go to wrecks on the interstate, let's say we come off the mountain and we have our fire hat on, and actually we don't wear the fire hats in the fire trucks, but it's not safe. But anyway, we get out of the truck, let's say we have our fire hat on, and it's not a fire. Let's say it's a vehicle wreck, and the vehicle's all crunched together. Do we say, well, we'll wait till rescue squad gets here? That's a long ways away. They have got to come in from town, which is, probably from them to get to us where we are is a good 20, 25 minutes. That's if they're at the station. No, we put on our rescue hat, and we pull out Jaws of Life, and we rip the car open. But let's say they're bleeding bad. Well, do we say, well, let's wait on the ambulance to get here? No, we put on our EMS hats, and we then do the medical aspect. Or let's say it's a hazardous material situation. Do we say, oh, let's wait for my hazmat to come in out of Morristown or come in out of Asheville? No, we deal with the situation. We put in our hazmat hats. When we work with people, we have to have 2 hats. We have to have the gospel hat. We have to have the medical missionary hat. Or we have to have on the medical missionary hat. We have to put on the gospel hat. Several years ago, I was working, and this girl comes in, and she looked like a whooped dog. I mean, she looked really bad. She was in her late 20s. She was single, had moved in with her mom. She had twins, not two twins, but she had twins, 10 months old. And she had just decided to come off of some really heavy narcotics, cold turkey. And she was having terrible withdrawals. And she went to the emergency room in our county, which was a different county away, hoping that she would, kind of not be where people knew her. And the emergency room says, we don't deal with your situation. Isn't that terrible? And they said, we can't help you. Go see Walt, see if he can help you. And so she comes over, and we're sitting there and we're talking. Can you help me? And we're sitting there and we're talking, and I'm talking about what's, kind of getting the history of what's going on, and then starting laying the grounds on some things she needs to do. And I said, do you go to church? She says, I can't go to church. I said, why can't you go to church? She says, I'm not perfect. Well, what do? Well, I tell you what, let me get my preacher's phone number for you. And let me see if I can schedule a time that you can talk to my preacher. No? Or maybe it's a person that says you're sitting there and you're talking to them and they have health issues. Let's say they have high blood pressure and they're having heart issues and they have diabetes and you're talking away and they say, out of the blue, why do you go to church on Saturday? Let me get my preacher and see. Let's see here. He's a real busy man. Maybe he can see you in 2 weeks. Sometimes, many times when people have that question, it's the Holy Spirit that presses them to ask that question. And so I'm talking to this girl, and I said, no, churches aren't for perfect people. I said, it's really a hospital for sinners. And I said, have you ever heard of David? No. I said, well, David was a king. And I said, you ain't killed nobody, have you? No. I said, well, he liked this woman, and he wanted this woman, and so he killed her husband so he could have her. You ain't killed nobody? No. And I said, have you ever heard of a guy called Paul? And I talked to her about this guy called Paul. See, you got to wear two hats. You wear the medical hat, you wear the gospel hat, you wear the gospel hat, you wear the medical hat. You just put whichever hat on you need to put at that time. I have a friend, and he's a gastroenterologist. Pardon? Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Is it? And when a patient comes in to see him, and he writes out the prescription, he doesn't want to give prednisone. He doesn't want to give Imuran. He doesn't want to give Asacol. He takes the prescription pad and he puts the diet that he wants them to be on. And he says, here's the exercise I'd like you to do between now and next time. And this is how much water I need you to drink. And when you exercise, I want you outside. And you need to cut back on your drinking. That isn't good for your gut. And so what's a good goal? You're drinking moonshine, you're drinking liquor, you're drinking whatever. Let's say you do. Let's say you're doing three beers a day. Can we cut back to 2 beers a day between now and next time you come? And when you exercise, you need to breathe and get outside in the fresh air. And I want you going to bed by 9 o'clock at night. And then he said, now this isn't the cool part. He says, I want you to go to this website. It's called Amazing Discoveries. And I want you to watch this guy called Walt Cross. Again, this isn't the cool part. He says, I want you to watch this guy called Walt Cross. And he has some health issues, talks that he does. So the next time this person comes in, he says, okay. He says, he examines them and sees how their gastrointestinal tract is doing. And he says, okay, did you eat what I told you to do? Did you do the exercise we talked? What is he going over? New Start. That's the prescription. He says, did you do the exercise we talked about? How much water are you drinking? And how are you drinking it? And are you getting sunshine? And did you cut back to 2 beers? And then are you going to bed by 9 o'clock? Or maybe he's just getting them. Some people where I live, they don't go to bed till, oh, here y'all don't go to bed till 1. I mean, it's kind of different. But a lot of folks don't go to bed till 1, 2, 3 in the morning. If he can get them to start at 12, it's kind of like going back to 2 beers. Go to bed at 12. And then he says, did you watch that guy called Walt Cross on Amazing Discoveries? Oh, yes. How'd you like it? But this is the cool part. He says, I got another one I want you to watch this time. His name's Walt too, but it's Walter. Who's he sending them to? Walter Veith. Do you see how it works? Now he's got them going to Amazing Discoveries. They're watching, you know, and now he sends them to, he says, they've got some, he says, this Walter has some really cool health talks, and he's got some good, interesting talks, gospel-wise too. And see, I live in the Bible Belt, and it's easy to talk about the Bible where I'm from. And so he gets them watching Walter. Just see how trusting God comes in there. And so here's this guy. Joe's probably 70, 72, something like that. Still going wide open, practicing medicine. But he does not want to do the drugs if he doesn't have to. He wants to do lifestyle. It says here, today they are not to be separated. What's not to be separated? Healing and teaching. Teaching what? The gospel. Never was there such an evangelist as Christ. He was the majesty of heaven, but he humbled himself to take our nature. The fallen nature, yes? That's the fallen nature. That he might meet men where they were, he went from city to city, from town to town, preaching the gospel and healing the sick. So as the example, we're to preach the gospel. Doesn't mean we have to stand up at a pulpit. Can we preach the gospel to, or teach the gospel to our neighbor, to our coworker, to our families? Yes. And to heal the sick. Well, can we help people with their health issues? Sure you can. And we'll talk about this a little further. During his ministry, Jesus devoted more time to healing the sick than to preaching. And why is that? See, the medical missionary work, it's called the right hand, the entering wedge. Let's say that I wanted to get through this door, and my hands were handcuffed behind me. How do I get through this door? Well, I could go and I bust the door down and go in like a bull in a china closet. Now, I've got guys on the fire department that are young. They got a lot of testosterone, and they'd love to kick that door in. But I tell them, try the handle. Or there's sometimes that we get up to a car and they want to get jaws of life and rip the door open, but sometimes you can just open the door. It's a lot easier. Well, see, what God designed was the medical missionary work is the right hand. The gospel, the health aspect. It opens the door, and then it allows the body, which represents the gospel, to walk through. Now, which is more important? The hand or the body? Pardon? Well, they're not to be separated, but what's the most important? The gospel, the body. But this is the way by which we're to do it. It also says it's the entering wedge. Now, this is important. Now, y'all use a lot of wood up here. So, y'all split wood, yes? Now, I don't know if y'all split wood like I do. I don't have one of them highfalutin wood splitters, but I use a wedge. And so let's say that you want to put the wedge on top of the wood. Can you just set it there and it stand there? No. Can you take it there and hit it once and then come back and hit it really hard? It might take off. And so you take it and you set it on top of the wood and you tap it in. Easy, harder, harder, harder. And then you can come back and wallop it good. When working with people, you don't wallop it good the first time. You gently. Yes? Are some people like a bull in a china closet? You know, they get in there and... And so, as Jesus was out there, he did more time healing than he did preaching. And why do you think he did that?
Because people were more susceptible to that.
They're more susceptible.
It opens what wedges to the gospel.
It does. I was in Dallas, Texas, and we were doing an evangelistic series. Who's ever heard of Jim Gilley? He was with, Jim passed away this summer. He had Dallas First Church, went down there with ASI, and we did an evangelistic series. He later became president of 3ABN. And it was a Sunday, and we did a health evangelistic program in the school there. They had a school. And all these people came in from Dallas, and we went through the 8 laws of health. And I was at the last booth, which was Trusting God, in which we did an overview. How did you like it? I looked at all their, the lab, the blood pressure and the pulse and the spirometer and all those, and made recommendations. And this big old guy comes in. And I said, how'd you like it? He goes, it's good. I said, well, would you like to come to some more classes on health? We're going to have them for a whole month here. He goes, yeah, I'd be interested. He hadn't told me yet that he'd just gotten out of prison as a drug dealer. Can you imagine? So he comes, and Dallas First Church is a huge church, big church. And this fella, he would sit right here every night. And he'd come, and we'd do like a 15-minute health talk. And then the message was given. Well, he would come for that 15-minute health talk, but he was too embarrassed to get up and walk out because he'd come all the way up to the front. So he'd sit there. And he'd been going through the program for a number of days, and I said, how is it? How do you like the meetings? He said, it's clear as mud. Well, that's not good. That's not good. And does the Holy Spirit ever tell you things to do that you wouldn't normally do? Now, by this time, I knew he was still a drug dealer. He'd gone back out in the streets. He was working the streets on Dallas at night. He and his wife were about to get a divorce. They weren't getting too long. He was having nightmares at night. He was going back to prison, not for getting caught doing drugs, but for beating his wife up. He was beating her up in the dreams, and they just didn't get along too good. And he's afraid he's going to get caught with that and go back to prison. And I said, we're doing some addiction cessation classes. Not just tobacco, but addiction cessation for whatever addiction the person may have. Would you like to come? Now, who in their right mind goes up to this big old drug dealer and says, you want to come to addiction cessation classes? But that's what I was impressed to do, and I did. And he says, yeah, I'll come. The guy gave up drugs, gave up his alcohol. We got him a job working in Dallas during the daytime, so he's in bed with his wife at night where he belonged. That relationship got better. He is off the streets. He was getting his sleep now when he was supposed to get his sleep. And right before the end of the classes, this series, I said, how is it? He goes, I totally understand. And he got baptized. Jim baptized him. Why? What happened physiologically with that guy's brain? He had more discernment. I mean, it wasn't clogged up with drugs. It wasn't clogged up with alcohol. I mean, the discernment was there. He was getting his sleep. So now do you see how he could discern? And do you see how they go together? Many times when a person is sick, they just don't feel good. Have you ever not felt good? Do you have good discernment when you're not feeling good? And so when Jesus would go and heal them, their brain worked better, their bodies worked better. But the other thing happens, I was talking to this guy. He came in. He was a retired sheriff from L.A. area. And he had retired where we were, and he came in and he had diabetes and hypertension. I was sitting and talking with he and his wife, and Mary Lou came up and she said, can you help me a minute? I need help. So I excused myself and I walked over to where the lady was by the front door, and she was crying. And I said, what's wrong? And she told me that her husband had just been to the physician, and he had, y'all know what MRSA is? Well, this just wasn't MRSA, it's vancomycin resistant. And none of the medications would work. And the physician told her, and I don't know what tool he was using, but he said he was a 10 out of 10 in severity. And he's going to die from this. And so she had gone over to that same drugstore, CVS Pharmacy, and was begging the pharmacist for another drug because she wanted her husband to live. And they said, ma'am, there's nothing else. There's nothing else can be given. And they said, go across the street and see Walt. And so she came over. And so she was there asking for help. And I said, I've used this for MRSA, and it works very well. But I've never used it for vancomycin resistant. I don't know. I said, are you willing to try? She said, I'm willing to do anything for my husband to stay alive. I said, okay. So I went and got it, brought it back. And I said, now this will not heal. I said, does your husband believe in God? And she goes, nope. I said, do you believe in God? Nope. I said, well, this won't heal. Only God will heal. I said, will you allow Mary Lou and I to have prayer that God will bless this, that it will heal your husband? She says, I told you, I'll do anything for my husband to stay alive. So, okay, so both of us prayed that God would bless this item, just a simple herb that God has given us, and a very powerful, powerful herb. And so she got it and she left. She came back 1 week later, all excited. She said, my husband is now a 4 out of 10. I don't know the scale he was using, but 4 out of 10 in severity. And she left. 2 weeks later, it had been 3 weeks, she came in, and she was, on top of the world. She says, he's healed. It's totally gone. Now, that doesn't just normally happen, does it? And she said, on her own, she says, my husband now believes in God. Now, what if I had said, I can fix your husband? Or what if I had said, this herb will heal your husband? Would her husband then believe in God? No. They claim to be atheist. And she's gone. And she just didn't hang around. That was in 2005, 2 years ago. I was working at our herb cabinet, which is almost as big as the screen is there, across wide. And so I was doing some work there. And this lady comes in. She says, my husband needs to stop smoking. Is there anything he can use? I said, sure. Do 3/4 of a cup of lemon juice, 1/4 of a cup of honey, and 1/3 of a teaspoon of peppermint essential oil. Mix it up. Have him take a nip anytime he gets a hankering. And y'all know what a hankering is. Y'all know what a nip is? Just a little sip. And she says, okay. And she writes it down. And she's walking out the door. And I said, wait a minute. Don't forget the most important part. She says, the peppermint? I said, no. The lemon? No. Prayer. And she says, you don't remember me, do you? I said, no, ma'am. And she walks back in the door. And she starts telling me the story. It's that lady. It's that same lady from back in 2005. And she starts telling me the story. Oh, boy, I remember it. Yeah. So I walked to her and I said, I got questions for you. I said, same husband? Yeah, same husband. I said, how's he doing? Fine. It never came back. That's huge, y'all. That is huge. I said, does he still believe in God? And then she goes, instead of, nope, like when she said when he doesn't believe in God, she is, oh yes, with this big old bright smile, he believes in God. And I said, I didn't get to ask you last time you were here. You left. But do you believe in God? And big smile. Oh, yes, I believe in God. I said, so what are you doing? Where are you? You know, what are you doing for church? And I hadn't seen her in all them years. And she said, oh, we go to Lincoln Baptist Church. We're very involved in the church. She said, I got to go. She's gone. I do not know what God holds for that man and that lady. But do you see how it works? Where if you help the person health-wise, they see God when God heals. So one, like this guy down in Dallas, his brain worked better so he could have better discernment in these series. But here's a guy who doesn't believe in God, and you tell him that God will bless this herb and he will be healed, and he was. He now believes now in this God, and now his wife now believes in this God. So through the healing process of the process of healing, they see God. Do you see how it works? Why does it work? It's the science. It's the science of salvation. And we are told we will study that science. We're told it is the highest science, and we'll study that science for eternity. It's huge. It's huge. The Savior made each work of healing an occasion for implanting divine principles in the mind and soul. So can we make each occasion for implanting divine principles in the mind and soul as we work with people, as we talk with people? We can. Or can we put up a barrier and they go, I don't want nothing to do with them because you're mean as a striped snake? Are there Christians who are mean? They are. Y'all don't have striped snakes up here, do you? We got striped snakes, and they're the mean ones. Like a garter snake. Garter snakes are real mean. This was the purpose of his work. Therefore, this should be the purpose of our work. Yes, because Christ is the example. He imparted earthly blessings that he might incline the hearts of men to receive the gospel of his grace. Nothing will help us more at this stage of our work than to understand and to fulfill the mission of the greatest medical missionary that ever trod the earth. We got to have academia. We got to have understanding. We have to understand. That's important. Nothing will help us more than to realize how sacred this kind of work, and how perfectly it corresponds with the life work of the great missionary. The object of our mission is the same as the object of Christ's mission. So, who's worked in corporate America? Does the mission drive what you do? Yes, it does. When I worked in corporate America for 20 years, if it was part of our mission statement, you did it. If it wasn't part of our mission statement, you didn't do it. You better change corporate, get them to change the mission statement in order to do it, because that's what drives everything. The object of our mission is the same as the object of Christ's mission. Why did God send his Son to the fallen world? To make known and to demonstrate to mankind his love for them. That's our goal, is to make known God's love for people. Satan, he's a liar. I mean, did he lie to Eve? He did. Does he lie still today? And does he lie to people and make people believe that God is this mean tyrant? Does he? He does. But God is love. To make known and to demonstrate to mankind his love for them. So we're supposed to help people know that God loves them. He's not mean. Christ came as a redeemer. And we need to let people know that. Through his ministry, he was to keep prominent his mission to save sinners. What is God's mission? To save humanity. What is Christ's mission? To save humanity. What is our mission? To point the sin-sick soul to Christ. That's it. That's our mission. God's mission is to save humanity. Christ's mission is to save humanity. And our mission is to point folks to Christ so that He may save them. That's it. It's real simple. See, it's got to be simple for us to do it. You know? You don't have to be a brain scientist, a surgeon, or a rocket scientist. We should ever remember that the object of the medical missionary work is to point sin-sick men and women to the man of Calvary, to take away the sin of the world. That is our goal, is to point folks to Christ. God calls for thousands to work for Him, not by preaching to those who know the truth for this time, but by warning those who have never heard the last message of mercy. That is a very interesting statement, isn't it? Let's read that statement again. God calls for thousands to work for Him, not by preaching to those who know the truth for this time. Can we spend our energies on folks who know the truth that just aren't complying? It's saying we need to go to those folks who haven't had this opportunity. I went to a church in Atlanta one time. I was somewhere. I forgot where it was. I was up in Washington, I think, Washington State. And this lady says, I can't believe what you told that church down in Atlanta. I said, what? Because people like y'all put it up on the internet and people watch it from all over. And she says, you told them, why are you still coming to their church? Because they ain't getting out of the cities. Well, that's what I told them. I go there. I was going there once a quarter. And finally, I told them one Sabbath, I said, why am I coming? Y'all ain't listening. You're still here. Years later, you haven't moved out of the city. I should be telling new people, you're not doing anything. And that's what it's talking about here, is, I don't know how that one happened. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Pardon? Was it that one? Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. Sometimes we can keep talking over and over and over to folks. We need to go to other folks that haven't heard the message. Work for the heart filled with an earnest longing for souls. And that's important. As you work with people, you just don't do it just to do it. You do it with a mission, with a purpose, to point their heart to Christ. There's a reason for doing it. Do medical missionary work. Thus you will gain access to the hearts of people. And the way will be prepared for a more decided proclamation of the truth. So it's saying do it. Do medical missionary work. Do medical missionary work. Thus you will gain access to the hearts of the people. The way will be prepared for a more decided proclamation of the truth. You will find that relieving their physical suffering gives an opportunity to minister to their spiritual needs. And that's what you find. When people are sick, many times they're sick spiritually. And I remember I was in Dallas. It was a Sabbath afternoon. And we went to this lady to do a Bible study. And she says, I just don't think I can do it. My knees are hurting so bad. I just can't think. So what do you do? Well, I'll come back later. No, we needed that opportunity. I was only in Dallas for a month. And so I said, have you got any cayenne pepper? Yes. I said, you got any hand cream? Yes. I might be able to help your knee a little bit. You want to try it? She says, yes. So she told me where the cayenne pepper was in the kitchen, and she told me where the cream was, and I went and got a little container and in the kitchen, and I squirted some hand cream in there, and then I poured some cayenne pepper in there. I took a spoon and I ran it around and ran it around. And I got the color kind of like a light pink in color. Well, cayenne pepper is called capsicum. You ever heard of capsicum cream for arthritis? So I said, well, let's see what we can do. So I gave it to her, and she rubbed it on her knee. And well, first I prayed that God would bless it. And she rubbed it on her knee, and we talked for a while. And she says, you know, that's gotten better. I said, you reckon we can have that Bible study? Yes. Do you see how it works, y'all? Who is to be a medical missionary? That's the question. Folks will say, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a therapist. I ain't trained. There are people who would tell you you're not trained, therefore you can't be. But that's not what it says here. And let me continue. The medical missionary work should be part of the work of every church in our land. Mary Lou and I were living, and at that time it was just Walter and Ashley. Carson hadn't been born yet. We're in Virginia, and we're a little town called Clifton Forge, a little train community for CSX Railroad, and the trains that had a big thing just down the hill from us, and you could hear the trains 24/7 working in the train yard. And there's a little church in Covington which had a paper mill, and it had 4 ladies, and the youngest was in her 70s. Well, because of that, we went over to Buena Vista Church because they had youngins, and we wanted our kids to be involved in children, other children. So we drive quite a ways for that. But that little church in Covington, Virginia, which had 4 ladies, the youngest being in her 70s, could they have said, well, you know, honey, we're just too old to do that? They drove to church. They'd get out. This is every church. So even that church of just 4 ladies should be a medical missionary training school. God wants ministers and church members to take a decided, active interest in medical missionary work. So preachers and members are to take a decided and an active interest. That's very descriptive, isn't it? A decided interest, an active interest. That means you just don't have academia. There's a lot of people out there that have. I was over in, where's our lady from Africa? She's not here this morning. I was in Rwanda, and this lady comes in. She was from the West Coast, and she was a very wealthy lady that would come over there and distribute her funds. And she comes in, she says, what you doing here? And I said, well, we're doing medical missionary training. Oh, I know about that. And she walks in. She had academia, maybe. She knew about the 8 laws of health, but was she applying it? Well, the way she ate breakfast that morning, she wasn't applying it. We need to have a decided, active interest in the medical missionary work. That means we get out and we do it. Just don't know about it, but are you helping your neighbor? Are you helping your coworker? Are you helping your family? Are you helping your kids? Are you doing it? We have come to a time when every member of the church should take hold of medical missionary work. Now, folks will say, you know, I just can't get out and do that. My health is not well enough. But is there something still they might be able to do? Could they maybe, when you have your cooking school, they sit at the door and get people's names? On the fire department, I have folks on our fire department that cannot fight fire. They don't have that ability. But you know what? They help us raise money. They might drive the fire truck, but they just can't go inside anymore. And so there's things I can get them to do. So there's things that every member can do. There's something, help clean, be in the back, help put supplies together as we're cooking in a cooking school. We have come to a time when every member of the church should take hold, not just have knowledge of, take hold of the medical missionary work. The world is a laser house filled with the victims of both physical and spiritual disease. Is that true? It is. Everywhere people are perishing for a lack of knowledge for the truths that have been committed to us. The members of the church are in need of awakening. Do you believe that? That's true. that they may realize their responsibility by God to impart these truths. Those who have been enlightened by the truth are to be light bearers to the world. To hide our light at this time is to make a terrible mistake. Now, if you worked at corporate, if the CEO told you you have made a terrible mistake, is that serious? Yeah, it's serious. And when God says to us, Henry, you've hid your light, you've made a terrible mistake, that's serious. The message to God's people today is arise, get up, shine, for the light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. You will never be ministers after the gospel order till you show a decided interest in medical missionary work, the gospel of healing and blessing and strengthening. You know, as a fire chief, I see no way a person can be a fire chief, though I met one, and I don't see how that person, I was over in Sweden, and there's this person politically was stuck in this position, had no experience in the fire service. When I go up on a situation, how do I know if I can send my men in there unless I've been there myself and know that situation? I know that environment. It's IDLH. It's immediately dangerous to health and life, or life and health. Immediately dangerous to life and health. How am I going to send those people into that situation unless I know that situation myself? You know what I'm saying? Preachers need to know the situation themselves in order to help the church members to be able to be medical missionaries. Christ commits to his followers an individual work. Christ commits to his followers an individual work, a work that cannot be done by proxy. Ministry to the sick and the poor, the giving of the gospel to the lost is not to be left to committees. Well, we have a health committee. That's what they do. That's not my job. Well, it is. Or organized charities, individual responsibility, individual effort, personal sacrifice is the requirement of the gospel. I don't have time. Well, we've got to figure it out. God's told us to do it. Satan, his job is to keep us plumb busy. And it's so easy to say, I don't got time. But as you're working at work and your neighbor's having problems with high blood pressure, can you share some things that they can do? Absolutely there is. God will use men, and people say, well, no one's going to use me. I ain't going to get used. Well, God will use men who are willing to be used. It is not the most brilliant, that's good news, or the most talented persons whose work produces the greatest and most lasting results. It's interesting. That little town I was telling you about in Clifton, Fords, there's a big paper mill up the river, West Vaco, and in Covington. And I got to know the HR director pretty well. We were on committees together. And she said, when we interview somebody, it doesn't matter if they're some scientist, whatever, does paper stuff, or the person who's running the forklift. She says, we look at where they placed in their class. We look at their IQ. We look at where they placed. She said, we would rather have a person with a lower IQ who placed in the top of the class than a person that had high IQ. Because the person with IQ, they just think they know everything. She says a person who has a lower IQ but had to work hard to get third, second in class, that's the employee that we want. Whether they're running the tow motor or they're one of our chemists. Well, that's what God's saying here. It's not the most brilliant who thinks they know everything, or the most talented whose work produces the greatest and most lasting results. Men and women are needed who have heard a message from heaven. The most effective workers are those who respond to the invitation. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. It's that person who identifies their weakness and they respond, and they work hard. And it makes total sense of what Westvaco was doing. The health reform I was shown is part of the third angel's message. There's the three angels' messages. The first and second were in 18, what? What years? 1843, 1844. First and second angel's message. And then came the third angel's message. And we're to share the first, second, and third together. They are not to be separated. And it says the health reform is part of the third angel's message. That's serious stuff. That's Revelation 13. I was shown it is a part of the third angel's message as just as closely connected with it as the arm and the hand with the human body. I saw that we as a people must, that's not should, that's not could, must make an advance move in this great work. Ministers and people must act in concert. God's people are not prepared for the loud cry of the third angel. Why? Because we're not applying the health reform. Is God waiting on us? He is. He's waiting on us. In choosing men and women for His service, God does not ask whether they possess worldly wealth, learning, or eloquence. He asks, do they walk humbly, or do they walk in such humility that I can teach them my way? I remember when I used to get nurses at work, and you get them from another healthcare institution, and not all healthcare institutions are equal in quality of care. And I wanted excellent quality of care. And you could hire a nurse from another institution who had poor habits, and you would have to work harder to train to change those habits than it would be to hire someone right out of school and teach them what you needed. It was just a lot easier, because they would say, well, that's how we did it where I come from. My response was, maybe you need to go back where you come from, because we want quality care here. And just because it was done in a healthcare institution does not mean it was quality. I want quality. And God says, do we walk in such humility that He can teach us His way? Very important. Can I put my words into their lips? And many times folks want to just ramble on what they have to say. But are we sharing what God's word is? Will they represent me? Or are they representing themselves? And there's people out there who are representing themselves. So last I'd like to look at, as we come to a close, what is a medical missionary to do? If you would approach the people acceptably, humble your hearts before God, and learn His ways, we shall gain much instruction for our work from the study of Christ's methods of labor and His manners of meeting people. So are we humble? And are we learning Christ's ways? Very important. These lessons are for us. There are conditions to be observed by all who would preserve health. All, again, all, that's everyone, all should learn what these conditions are. The Lord is not pleased with ignorance in regard to His laws. You're driving down the road and you're doing 100 miles an hour. Or let's say you're driving down the road and you're doing 55 and law enforcement pulls you over and it's a 15 mile an hour. Well, I didn't see the change to 15 mile an hour. You ran through a school zone. Are they going to let you by? Not in my area. I cannot even, with a fire truck running emergency traffic, cannot run 1 mile an hour over the school zone speed. You're not allowed to. Law enforcement cannot run emergency traffic through a school zone. Emergency traffic. That is school zone. We protect it. So we can't say, well, I just didn't see the sign. God says you can't be ignorant. I've shared this. 160 years ago, 2 months ago. 2 months ago, it's been 160 years we've known this information. What have we done with it? Have we applied it? Have we wasted it? It's sad. When I took nutrition from Cornell University, I learned more there about this information. The rocks are crying out, y'all. The Lord is not pleased with ignorance in regard to His laws, either natural or spiritual. We are to be workers together with God for the restoration of health to the body as well as to the soul. Make Christ's work your example. Constantly, He went about doing good, feeding the hungry, healing the sick. No one who came to Him for sympathy was disappointed. So what do we do? There's a lot of people in need. How do we discern between they're just out a loafer and they're not really needing it? And we let God sort that out. Medical missionary work is the pioneer work for the gospel. The door through which the truth for this time is to find entrance to many homes. God's people are to be genuine medical missionaries. Now, who's ever heard of true education? So must there then be false education? So if that's so, then where it says genuine medical missionaries, may they be then non-genuine? False? Yes. We're actually told about false health, true health, therefore there must be false health, and I worked in that for many years. And I'm not saying that allopathic health is all wrong, for there's a lot of good. When I went up to that guy last Wednesday, was it Tuesday evening, his motorcycle was 200 yards down the interstate. That's how fast he was going. His arm was 2 lengths of this church back up the road from where his body finally stopped. Did he need a charcoal poultice? Did he need a hot foot bath? Did he need a massage? Did he need a fever treatment? Did he need Golden Seal? No, he needed emergency medicine. There's no question. And I flew him out by helicopter to the nearest hospital to provide surgery for this man. There's need for that. But unfortunately, as one professor at Loma Linda told me years ago, he said, the majority of what happens on the floor, now you've got different areas in a hospital. You've got the floor where general care is. And then you have your units. You've got your surgery room, suites. You've got your ED, your emergency department. But he says the majority of everything that happens on the floor of Loma Linda, and he was a professor there, he said could happen in a lifestyle center. That means you could do it yourselves with chronic diseases. God's people are to be genuine medical missionaries, for they are to learn to minister to the needs of both soul and body. The purest unselfishness is to be shown by our workers as, with the knowledge and experience gained by practical work, they go out to give treatment to the sick. As they go from house to house, they will find access to many hearts. Do you know who your neighbors are? Do you know your neighbor's name? Do you know your neighbor's health needs? Do you ever go and talk to your neighbors? As you go house to house, they will find access to many hearts. Many will be reached who otherwise never would have heard the gospel message. So let's look at this a little deeper. So we're to go house to house, and if we don't do it, it says, many will reach those otherwise never would have heard the gospel message. So that could mean then, if you're not going out house to house to those folks, they may never hear the gospel message. That's huge, y'all. That's huge. Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to apply them. Yes, we need academia, but not only academia. We've got to be able to take it from here and put it to here. So as you come to a person, they have health issues, blood pressure. So what do we do for blood pressure? What are the causes of blood pressure? Are they dehydrated? Are they stressed? Number one cause of hypertension, stress. Huge. Raises cortisol, lowers potassium. Boom, blood pressure goes up. Are they dehydrated? With dehydration, you don't have adequate water to the brain. You're more prone to be stressed. Are they dehydrated? The viscosity of the blood is thicker. Are they dehydrated? And the kidneys don't work well, and the kidneys are the switches that run the blood pressure. Are they dehydrated, which affects the conductivity in the body, the electricity? The higher the electricity, the more they're prone to high blood pressure. Dehydration, they don't urinate as much, and so it's through urination that you get rid of excess sodium. Is it because they're overweight? Is it because they just have renal issues, actually because of renal failure? And again, the kidneys are the switches that run the blood pressure. If they have renal issues, you've got to fix the renal issues to fix the blood pressure. Is it because they have clogged arteries? They have a smaller lumen. And if you want to wash your car, you put a tip on there that's smaller. It has more pressure. Or does they have hardening of the arteries, arteriosclerosis, and it doesn't flex? See, if you have a bilge pump and the pipe will flex, and the pressure isn't as great because the pipe gets bigger. But if you have a rigid pipe, then your internal pressure is higher. Or is it a cardiac issue? There's many reasons that can cause hypertension. Last night we talked about if you're rubbing sandpaper and you put medicine on it, you rub sandpaper. You got to get to the root cause. And so as you sit with that friend who is your neighbor or your coworker, is that easy to say, do you have stress? And work through stress. We're going to talk about stress this afternoon. And help them. Are they dehydrated? Help them learn how much water to drink and how to drink water. Are they outside ideal body? That's the top three I work with right there. Stress, dehydration, ideal body weight. That's the top three. And if you can help them on those three many times, the blood pressure will come back to normal. But you don't take the credit. It is God that is doing that healing because we can't do a lick. But we got to have the practical training in order to do that. The minister will be often called upon to act the part of a physician. He should have a training that will enable him to administer to the simpler remedies for the relief of suffering. Ministers and Bible workers should prepare themselves. Should we be Bible workers? We should, so that's us. Should prepare themselves for this line of work, for in doing it, they are following the example of Christ. They should be as well prepared to educate and practice to combat disease of the body as they are to heal the sin-sick soul by pointing to the great physician. They are fulfilling the commission which Christ gave to the 12 and afterwards to the 70. It's a work for all of us. In whatsoever city ye enter, heal the sick that are therein, and say unto them, the kingdom of God is come nigh unto you. Christ stands by their side as ready to heal the sick as when he was on this earth in person. This is a huge promise, y'all. As you're sitting with that person and you're going, God, I'm just starting this. I've just started learning this. I'm trying to help my buddy next door who's got blood pressure problems. I'm going to need your help. Just as Christ was here 2,000 years ago, he says here he will be there for you, helping your friend. That's huge. The Creator is there to help you work with your friend. You can't get any better than that. Those who are sick in body are nearly always sick in soul. And when the soul is sick, the body is made sick. Isn't that interesting? To reach the people, wherever they are, and wherever their position or condition, and to help them in every possible way is true ministry. Let's see here. God's plan is first to reach the heart. Your success will not depend so much upon your knowledge and accomplishments as upon your ability to find your way to the heart. See, we're not doing this by ourselves. You've got Christ that is willing to work with you on this. Isn't that cool? You've got an angel that's right there with you, that's there to help you. Have you ever tried to think about something and all of a sudden, boom, the answer comes to you? Yeah, He does. There are, when I work with people, and I pray each morning that God will give me wisdom. And as I work with people, I may pray with them aloud, or as I work with them, okay, God, help me out. What do I need to do to help this person? And at first I would argue with him. No, that doesn't work for this physiologically. Who am I to argue with God? But I'd obey, and whoa, that does work. And now it's like, okay, well, teach me something new, and you need to do this, you need to do that. If you listen, do you know what I'm saying? Have you ever prayed and God impresses you to do something for that answer to the question you just gave? He's there to be with you. Medical missionary work is the pioneer work of the gospel, the door through which the truth for this time is to find entrance to many homes. God's people are to be genuine medical missionaries, not, so-so. Genuine medical missionaries. For they are to learn to minister to the needs of both soul and body. That's every one of our jobs. That's the expectation of God. Have you ever gone for a job and they give you a job description? Well, you better follow it, or they'll find someone else that will. It's just real simple. I can't make a person to do it. They're not my slave. And so if this is the job description that I need someone to do, they do it. If they want to do something else, then they need to go somewhere else so they can do something else. But this is the job description I needed my staff to do. That's the way God is. He expects us to do it. The purest unselfishness is to be shown by our workers as, with the knowledge and experience gained by practical work, we've got to do it. You can't just have academia. You've got to get out and do it over and over and over again. They go out to give treatments to the sick. As they go from house to house, they will find access to many hearts. Many will be reached who otherwise would have never heard the gospel message. It's amazing. There's so many stories I could share, but we don't have the time. But as you work with people, the more you do it, the more you'll know how to do it. And who do you start with? These guys right here. Start with your spouse. Start with your kids. And if you hurt them, they ain't going to sue you. Work with, you know them well. You watch how the hot foot treatment does. I'll tell you the story. I'll tell you anyway. Mary Lou and I are doing a class with several folks down in Chattanooga and Collegedale, at McDonald Road Church. And there's a bunch of people there. A bunch of people came and brought their young'uns, K through 12. And it was Thursday morning. A lady comes in, and we taught hydrotherapy on Wednesday. And she comes in and she says, I need to tell you what happened last night when I got home. And it was like serious, and her kid was kindergartner. She says, I went home and I had a terrible, awful headache, migraine. She says, my little kindergartner told me to sit down in a chair, went and got a bucket, filled it with hot water, put my feet in it, and prayed that God would bless it. Went and got another bucket, put ice in it, put water in it, and went and got 2 washcloths, put one on my forehead and one on the back of my head. And she kept this water hot, kept this water cold, kept doing this back and forth. She says, my migraine went away. A kindergartner. Can you? Yeah. Can we not then do it? That's huge. Let me show you this real quick. This is the medical missionary work. It's God's systematic healthcare system. We got the church. In the church, this is the center of the medical missionary work. This building right here is the center of the medical missionary work. And out of it, we have members. We teach the members here. We may have a clinic that has a doc that does medical missionary work at her office. We've got a restaurant that we have a member that has a good quality vegan restaurant that can show people what healthy food tastes like. We've got a health food store where they can get it. We may have a church school that teaches our kids. Yes, you can send someone away to Uchee Pine or Weimar or whatever you need to send them off. We've got our universities. But the one on the right is the local, and the other one I need to put on there is a church member who has a CSA. You know, the CSA is where you sell food out of the farm, out of your gardens. And here's how it works. Let's say that the member is working at making widgets, and someone there at work has diabetes, and you say, "Listen, you want to go to dinner?" And sure. And you go to the restaurant. This is good food. Where do you get that kind of food? Well, you then say, well, let me show you on the way back to work. You take them by the store, and the health food store, and you say, you can get it in there, and you make it. Well, but I don't know how to make it. Well, we do classes in the green place right here. See, we want them comfortable to come here. And then, but my doctor said I'm going to have diabetes the rest of my life. There ain't everything I can do to it. Well, I tell you what, I know this doctor. She knows how to reverse diabetes. Are you serious? Yep. You just go see her, and she can reverse diabetes. Well, then you get an appointment to go see that doctor. But just like an orthopedist doesn't do physical therapy. The physical therapist does the evaluation. The orthopedist looks at the eval, says, yep, that's what I want done. See, you're the therapist. You're the medical missionary. The doc says, yes, it can be done, but I have this person that knows what they're doing. And you work together, teaching them how to eat right, exercise. Doc ain't got time to do all that. But you can teach them that kind of stuff. They still go back, check out with the doc, and as their blood sugar starts cutting back, then the doc says, oh, yeah, we can cut back on that insulin. Yeah, we can cut back on that metformin. And it's still being monitored, but that's the way it works, y'all. It works so simple. And as they come to the education center, you can also teach them who's really doing the healing. And it's God that is doing that healing. And I'll share this last one. I wish to tell you that soon there will be no work done in ministerial lines but medical missionary work. Shall we pray? Our dear Heavenly Father, Lord, you made it clear. Lord, give us the willingness. Give us the desire to learn, to obey. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, this is kind of nice, actually. The majority of people are already in the sanctuary, so that's pretty good. For the sake of our timing, so that we can glean as much information from our guest speaker as possible, I'm going to try to keep the announcements and the praise and share time kind of abbreviated, so that we can look forward to another great message. So there are a couple of very important announcements, though, to pay attention to. I want to start with this the little handout that's in your bulletin. The Adventure and Pathfinder Club will be starting the 5th of September. It's a Tuesday night. We meet on Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock. So, hey, welcome back, by the way. Now, adventures, as you can read in there, between ages 4 and 9. We do have younger kids, and that's okay. At Pathfinders, this will be our first year for Pathfinders, so that's 10 and up. It's pretty exciting to have a Pathfinder club starting. And then we meet on the 5th, and just 3 days later, the conference is doing a camp out. So at the Palmer Pioneer Campground. So if you want your child to join Pathfinders, please come see me today or Rachel. I will be traveling, so the point of contact will be Rachel, my wife, after today, okay? And let's see, there's the one about the SDA booth at the Alaska State Fair. You can read about that. And, for Pathfinders Adventures, we need some additional help. Our club has grown. I've told you guys we started with 6. The next year we had 12. The next year we had 24. So we are doubling every year. So that means this year we'll have 50. So if we keep following that trend. So I need additional instructors and help with that. If we can't find folks to help us, then we're going to have to trim what we can actually do. So please, if you have any sort of burden for the youth, please let me know and we can plug you in. I promise it's very easy and we will teach you everything you need to know. The last announcement, the other announcement that's important is Women's Retreat is very soon. It's just a couple weeks away. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, Women's Retreat's in 2 weeks. I'm hoping I'll be here tomorrow. For those that are coming, if you can bring your payment then. For those that are just going to come maybe Friday night or maybe just on Sabbath or just on Sunday morning, the location does ask for a $10 per person for the usage of their services in the building and that kind of stuff. $10 per person per day. And then there's flyers. They look like this. They're on the front porch out there. You can get it. But if you have any questions about the Women's Retreat, we're going to be in Jeremiah and the Potter's Wheel. I'm so thankful that God's gone before us, and we have an artist that this is her passion is pottery, and so she's going to talk. And I've talked to her quite a bit and listened to her, and the things she says about the clay and working with it, you can hear the Bible in it. So she'll be there Friday night, and then she'll be there Sunday morning, and then we're going to be getting into the Bible and what God says about forming us on Sabbath. So I welcome any and all of you to talk to me, pick up a flyer. My phone number's on here. And if you did already sign up and I don't have your phone number, I do need to obtain it. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. The last important announcement to make is to draw your attention to the business, kind of emergency business meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30. So we need as many members as possible to have a quorum. You can read about what it's about, but in short, it's in relation to cleaning up our October business meeting minutes where we voted to approve to sell our ground lease for the cell tower. We need to kind of revamp the minutes a little bit on that so that the Alaska Conference can approve that ultimate vote. So if you can please make it, then so that'll be at 8:30.